And 3, 2, 1. Well, it's a big hello to the young and lovely Dianne McGrath. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Laban. You young man, you.
Well, I believe we are as young as the person we are touching. So, and
we're connected right now. So yes, we're twins.
So we are basically the same person. It's a real thrill. It's a real pleasure, and I don't say that very lightly to have you as the inaugural guest on the How to Become Your Own Superhero podcast.
Fantastic. Love it.
And which is the name of the YouTube channel I set up a long time ago, about 6 months ago. And I was like, this is a great platform to how to become your own superhero. This touches on lots of really great things. So for the people out there in the world that are very understanding and loving and have taken the time to watch or listen to this, who is Dianne McGrath?
Gosh, Dianne McGrath is, the sort of blurb that you read about me online would be Mars One astronaut candidate, PhD candidate as well. Why is these candidates? A biohacker, perimenopausal 50-year-old woman who is actually a twin. I am a twin.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a twin brother. And so I don't know, just a general curious person that is just fascinated by what our potential is. So I love the name of your podcast series. I think we all have such incredible potential, and I don't mind embracing the concept of being a candidate, because it's a learning process, isn't it? You're a candidate, it's always something you're approaching and learning and seeking to become potentially. Yeah.
Well, look, a candidate's a great word. My background for a long time was and has been up until recently 14 years in recruitment. And in order for you to get a job, you have to be a candidate at some point. It's the stepping stone really to the next phase. So it's a great way to describe, I think, a lot of the stuff that you do, Dianne, and the name How to Become Your Own Superhero really is pretty self-explanatory. I think it's all about the empowerment for the individual. And the understanding that really how you end up in this life is almost exclusively down to how you go about your own business.
Yeah.
With the odd, bolt of lightning exception to the rule there. You've lived an extraordinary life to this point, and you and I had the pleasure of connecting at the Professional Speakers Association conference just a couple of weeks ago, which would have been probably the last conference in the world.
Really of any type, exactly. It's extraordinary to think that after that, pretty much every conference, whether it be medical or business, just kind of shut down. The door's shut.
It really is amazing and quite serendipitous from my end, I think. And you and I connected over a couple of different things, which we can maybe explore sort of a little bit later on. Can you tell us a little bit more about Mars One? I'm just going to jump straight into it because this is really
that's
fascinating.
Right. Yeah, sure. It's one of the many strings in the bow. We all have many passions in life. So for me, part of my interest in life is to see if we can create a sustainable society. Like, how can we become truly energy efficient, not waste food, plastic free, really think about our resources in a much more, closed loop environment. And Mars One's concept, it's a not-for-profit, apolitical organisation based in the Netherlands, but they're international. And they want to establish the first permanent human settlement on Mars. So I loved that. Yeah, I know. It's like, let's just pause for a minute there and let that sink in. That is one way. There's no return trip there. It's like stepping inside the front door of IKEA and you just have, there's only one way. There's only one way in IKEA.
It's basically the same thing, really.
Exactly. Absolutely. And we'll have flat packs too. Same.
Let's hope they're easier to assemble.
Exactly. So the concept by wanting to go one way to Mars One is doing that because it's more efficient. They don't have to develop the technology to return. There's been over 50, 60 nearly missions to Mars since the 1960s, and they've all been one way. And about 80 to 90, no, about 84% of them, I think it is, have been successful as well. So when people think, oh my gosh, you're going to die, it's like, well, I've got a much better chance of surviving than dying, but that's okay. Let's not worry about it. Funny how people, it's that negativity bias thing too. It's like the discount of what aspect of either risk or opportunity. What do you discount there? It's all completely dependent upon your value, right? So their idea is to use existing technology and go one way to Mars. And I loved that idea when I first heard about it for multiple reasons. The first being was that if we have to go and live on Mars, we would treat everything differently than if we're just visiting. Absolutely. I mean, you think about, when you go on holiday somewhere, don't you just let loose and relax, and you might get connected with the local environment, but might not as well, and you might use your behaviors in that new place that you're visiting for a short time, but not thinking about the impact you have on that location, even just being a tourist there. So I loved the idea of having to go one way, because it meant that, and live there, because I would treat the place differently than just going there, picking up some rocks and coming home. And to be able to survive there, we have to be sustainable. I mean, it takes 7 months to get from Earth to Mars.
Wow.
So it's the one-way bit, no matter which way you're going, that's the fastest trip from one to the other. So resupply is pretty much impossible. So when we run out of stuff, we really are out. There's no Bunnings over the next crater. I can't just go and pop out and get some more fertilizer. That's not going to work. We have to have all those systems already planned and tested and in place that allow us to eat sustainably, to ensure we can always have energy every day, warmth, security, all this sort of stuff, the things that we take for granted every day to be able to turn on a light in our Western societies. We won't have that sort of security of. We need to really make sure that that's there. And that, with that necessity of having to survive without resupply, I think the creativity that will come out of that as well, and the innovation will assist us in developing some extraordinary solutions to our problems here on Earth today. And I love that, because I mean, if we have to do that for Mars, well, great. We're not going to build it all on Mars and test it on Mars the first time. Of course not. We'll develop it and test it and scale it up and everything here on this planet first. So we have the potential to transform Earth, to become Earth 2.0 before we even go to the red planet, which is just, for a sustainability expert, it's like, I can transform this planet by just wanting to go to Mars. It's brilliant. Exactly. Boom.
It really is extraordinary, Diane, and it's not something that I was overly familiar with up until recently, and I started sort of learning more about it. And when we were communicating just a couple of weeks ago, you shared with me a podcast that you had seen, Professor Guy McPherson, on the Human Performance Outliers podcast. He's a client scientist guru. He's a professor, and he's predicted, I think, the world's going to end in about 8 years. Is that right?
Yes, roughly in about 7 or so 8 years. We may have some slowdown on that with the current situation with COVID and everybody staying inside and a lot less industrial production, and so thus the effect on climate change. And we saw much clearer air and less pollution from China during some of their COVID lockdown, and we'll have the same we saw the same in Europe too. And so there will be some time for that to maybe slow down a little bit. But yeah, his prediction is about 7 years or so, and the Earth is, well, not the Earth is going to be fine. It's us as a species that won't be.
That's right, yeah.
And that's what his prediction is. And it sounds pretty doomsday-ish, but there's even more extreme people in the environmental science areas that are even more extreme, that say, well, actually, we've only got about a year or two. Even the IPCC are saying at their worst case scenario, it may be a decade or just over a decade. So we do have some, high risk situation potentially in the next decade if we don't look to adapt and modify not just our behavior, but well, we are going to have climate change. It's already happening. We've seen it. We had our, the bushfires here, floods elsewhere. There's hurricanes right now in the States. A lot of deaths. This sort of stuff. It will happen. This isn't just about the environment anymore. This becomes about human health and human survival. And I think it's a time when we can stop, like, just pointing a finger to go, oh, industrial, this, that, or, oh, it's really just another ice age. Does it really matter why? It's happening. So, we can change, or we're going to be changed. It's very simple.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not, I'm getting the wind up lights already. Just bear with me one second.
Okay.
The fascinating thing about this podcast, apart from the blinking lights, this is like the blinking lights of the spaceship that you'll be experiencing when you take off. And I wonder if I do that it might make things a little bit. This is a bit more R.L. Stein goosebumps kind of stuff. But the really interesting thing I found about that podcast, and I did watch it the day after I was made redundant from my day job. So it wasn't
fantastic.
It wasn't the greatest thing to do.
Hashtag doomsday.
But what's the crossover? So you're down to the last 100 globally to be shortlisted. How many people are going? How many people are they taking?
Yes.
And what's the time frame? Can you get out of here before the world explodes?
Before the world explodes. Well, according to Professor McPherson, the world won't explode, but us as a species will cease to exist because we won't have any of the critical aspects of our habitat, and habitat is what feeds us, our source of energy and water and all that sort of stuff. So by the time some of the critical species are gone, will we still be here? That's the key thing. And he predicts about 7 years IPCC, so maybe 10, maybe a bit more. Mars One's project is, the concept is to send the first crew in 2031. So we might be right on the edge of that then. Just, see you later. I'm good now. But I think that with the current environment at the moment, we're seeing a lot of delays in any activity in space flight travel, whether it's through what NASA's programs are, what the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, every single space agency is having delays or shelving of their major programs. So I'd be surprised if any mission, no matter whether it's 10 years out, is actually going to hit those sorts of timelines. They'll all move out another couple of years, because every time you miss a timeline to go to Mars, you can't go for another 26 months roughly.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's only every roughly about 2 years that the planets get into the right sort of alignment in their different orbits around the sun so that it can be the fastest trajectory. That 7 months requires the planets to be at exactly a particular position in their two different orbits. Otherwise, you could miss each other and just have to go around again. Or it's going to be more inefficient fuel-wise or whatever. So it's much more efficient 7 months, but they're only every 26 months between.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. And I think one of the things that might expedite this whole process, Diane, is that if they realise that that the Earth is about to just come to a closure, that they go, let's inhabit another planet and keep life going and throw some money at, like John F. Kennedy did with the space program. He was like, we want to beat the Russians.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? When there's enough incentive to do something, when the will for anything is strong, then you can make it happen if you've got the right sort of support system and fuel in essence. So, can you do it? What do you want to do? And how do you make it happen? With Mars One's concept, they need funding. So they do have some funding. They've got private investors that have been supporting their activity over the last handful of years. And they actually tried to get into the stock exchange too. And so there's a misconception out there that Mars One are bankrupt, but they're not. Mars One Ventures, which is a company they bought on the stock exchange, it was called something else. They bought it on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, and they changed the name of that company to Mars One Ventures, and that went under. So that was but the parent company, Mars One, is still perfectly fine. So, however, because they've changed their name, everyone gets confused. They go, oh, Mars One, it's gone bankrupt. Like, no, it's not.
That's really great clarification. I didn't know that they were listed on the stock exchange. And I suppose it makes sense to try and raise some capital, because it's not going to be cheap to send you to Mars.
No, billions of dollars. But, you know, cheaper than, I think cheaper than a couple of years worth of television for the football. Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's cheaper to send us to Mars than to have a couple of years worth of televised NRL or AFL.
Wow.
Let's get our priorities right here, people.
One of the obvious questions that I'm sure our listeners or viewers might have is there a small chance that you're going to Mars just to run away from a really, really annoying person and not just colonize a new planet?
Well, you know, there are times when there's a few politicians that I do think questionably about and perhaps put them on a rocket to put on the other side of the planet. However, no, I'm not someone that's really into running away from things. I tend to step towards things. So when I'm afraid of something, I take a big, deep breath. Oh, absolutely, I get terrified sometimes, but I move towards it because it's something I need to approach. Like when I'm exploring new ideas, for example, I'll get a sense for how I feel. And if I'm feeling a little bit fearful almost, then I do it. I have to, that's telling me I need to do this because I'm going to grow so much from this. It might be extraordinarily difficult. I may have many moments when I'm in a corner crying. However, I know that by persisting and really working hard, I will take myself to another level. I'll become, you know, the next best part of myself.
And this is one of the things I really like about you, Diane. It's there's not a lot of people that I come in contact with that have a mindset like yours. You're what's known affectionately as a biohacker. And I've spoken to a few people about this recently, and the majority of people when I ask them, do you know what a biohacker is? They don't know. So what is a biohacker in a really easy to describe layman's terms, if you will?
Yeah, so a biohacker generally is somebody that uses technology or knowledge to alter aspects of their well-being, themselves, their physiology, to optimize it to a level that otherwise wouldn't be achievable. So we think about one example of biohacker can be, say, what's called a grinder. Now, a grinder, which is not, I'm not referring to a particular app. I'm referring to using a grinder as someone that might insert some technology into their body, like maybe a chip in their finger or whatever, and so that they can swipe to get through doors just by using their hands. So that's what a grinder would be. So they're optimizing what their body is capable of by using either technology or knowledge. But these aren't new ideas. I mean, if we think about the cochlear implant, for example, you know, pacemakers, things like that, we've been using this sort of technology to optimize what we're capable of for quite some time. I don't have anything implanted just yet. I'm not adverse to the concept at all of becoming what's called post-human, is the other sort of level of grinding. I'm at the moment doing a lot of more stuff around the physiology and health and playing with extra hacks that aren't more common. So, for example, might use red light therapy or cryogenics or other things like that. So cryotherapy. So I'll really sort of explore a few different things that I can take things to a level that I can't get normally just by like diet and exercise, for example.
And look, it's a fascinating area and something that I've been dabbling in as well from time to time. And I suppose what's some of the more interesting biohacking stunts that you've attempted and have been surprised or not surprised aside from the response or the outcomes?
Look, I think some of the stuff that we can all do at home that, you know, we hear about, we think diet and exercise, we kind of just become something that washes over us and we think, oh yeah, I'll eat healthy or whatever. But when I started to really explore that in a way that could optimize what I was capable of, I was incredibly surprised by some of the outcomes. Like, for example, by removing sugars and carbohydrates from my diet. I first started doing it back in 2014, I think it is. Yeah, about 6 years ago. I went onto the ketogenic diet, or low carb first, and then really pretty much went keto almost straight away. And I've been having 2 weeks of hell of the transition of basically trying to get over sugar.
The keto flu.
The keto flu, oh my gosh. Think, what am I doing? But then after that, just the miracle. Now, one of the amazing things that I experienced was I had zero period pain. Now, this may not be something that many of your gentlemen that might listen to this would care too much about unless their partners get it.
It's a perfectly 50-50 split as far as we're concerned.
Awesome.
Or 48-48 and the 4% that the non-gendered pronouns.
Exactly.
We're very diverse here.
Or anybody that may experience menstruation. I just had the first time ever, like a pain-free period, and I thought, oh my God, is this what life could be like? Who knew? I just had to stop sugar to do that. So some of the small, tiny little things of taking out things that harm. And that's, I guess, for me, as part of my process is when I look at something I want to try and achieve, like if I want to achieve greater cognitive function or improve my vision or increase my bone mass or whatever it's been, some of the different experiments I've been doing over the years. When I first analyze what the issue is, what I'm trying to solve, I have a look at, am I doing something that actually causes harm first? If I am, why don't we do something mad like stop it?
Yeah.
Why keep taking other pills when I could just stop that thing and then I don't even need to take pills? It saves time, saves effort, improves all outcomes. So one of them was stopping the sugar, and it was just amazing. I know you're involved with Sugar by Half as well. Is that right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, correct. It's the it's the Sugar Reduction Initiative with its very cleverly branded name, run by Professor Peter Bruckner, a sports medicine. He's a professor and been involved with elite sport for a long time, and I'm very privileged to be a part of that. For the meantime, while everything's in lockdown, a lot of that stuff will be put on hiatus. But very, very important and very close to my own heart as well. In our conversations, you and I, we follow a similar sort of eating regime. I've adopted this largely animal protein based, like a Paleolithic ketogenic style diet, and had some wonderful, wonderful success with regards to curing an incurable autoimmune disease in the form of GERD, like a reflux disorder.
Fantastic.
And, after being told by many, many medical professionals that what I had was, a genetic disorder and there was nothing I could do about it, and yada, yada, yada. And then I suppose when you have some success with that, you start then questioning, what else are they wrong about? And it sort of, you end up down this rabbit hole. And because I know one of the things that you're trying to figure out right now is the 7 months in space depletes your bone mass by the same amount as what you would experience going through a full menopause, something along those lines. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's right. Usually a woman going through menopause over about 3 to 5 years, that it's quite a protracted process for women. And it's something where they can lose about 20% of their bone mass. And astronauts tend to lose about the same amount when they spend 6 months in space. So just 6 months and you'll have osteoporotic bones, essentially.
Wow.
It's phenomenal. And that's why one of the reasons that astronauts have to exercise for about 2.5 hours a day. Imagine doing that for 6 months, like 2.5 every single day. I mean, Laban, you and I have both done a lot of distance running. But, imagine if you have to do a 2.5 hour run every day, 0 rest days, and in that as well, you're running, but you're also doing resistance training and, on the bike. And so it's pretty intense. And so I thought, if I'm going to go to Mars, okay, I'll be going 7 months in zero gravity where this is a risk.
Yeah.
If I don't exercise that excessively. And even then, that exercise doesn't prevent them losing mass. They still end up losing sometimes about 3% of their bone mass. So it still happens. It's almost impossible to maintain bone mass in space. And then you go to Mars. Mars, okay, has got gravity, and that's the key there. So having some gravity. On Earth, we have gravity, and so thus the amount of gravity we have allows us to have, we've all heard of the term weight-bearing exercise, and that's what helps give our bones enough signal to continue to get strong or maintain their strength. Usually, of course, if we're less active and things like that, and there's a lot of other reasons why we might have problems. But then on Mars, the gravity is about 1/3 of Earth's. And so the risk is still there that we might have to exercise a lot every day, like not necessarily 2.5 hours, but a minimum an hour, hour and a half. We don't know yet because no one's been to Mars yet. We don't have any data of any humans on Mars. So all we're doing at the moment is modeling and doing things called bed rest exercise or experiments where in hospitals they might put a whole lot of subjects in bed to do nothing in a particular angle on the bed to try and simulate having the same sort of gravity on their bones. And it's not the same. It's not the same as if you're physically in a place doing that work. So whoever gets to go first to Mars, and I'm hoping I'm one of those who get to do it because I love an experiment, we will be the first people to try this stuff to work out how we can do this. But I've started working on that already. It's like, well, why wait when I can actually prevent? That's the key. If I thought, if I can put some bone in the bank, like if I can put some there now, I've got something there that I can afford to lose if I do lose any at all. So that's what I've been working on for the last few years, because it's a slow process. You can't just, plug something in and turn it on and ta-da, I've increased my bone mass overnight. It doesn't work like that. It's a very slow process because every day your bones both build and break down. There's a cycle that goes on. So you need to work with that cycle in a way that increases the build and reduces how much goes out the door. So that's what I've been doing through lots of different biohacks, changing aspects of what I eat, when I eat. The timing of things makes a difference too. Exercise definitely makes a huge difference, and is adding other more unusual hacks in, such as the cryotherapy, stuff like that. Yeah.
It's really interesting. We spoke about this offline a couple of weeks ago as well. In the process of my health journey, I was able to lose. It's been about up to 22 kilos of actual body fat.
That's phenomenal.
Weight. And right, and then and this was all verified through DEXA scan and through the biometric scales and even the Fitbit scales that have been used daily. So obviously the DEXA is the gold standard. And and this is an N=1 only experiment at this point. But I found this interesting, and it might be something that they look at later on. But when you, like in that whole process, I've actually added on about 0.5 kilo of skeletal bone density. Now, my uptake in running has increased throughout that period. And that will certainly help. But from the people that I've spoken to, they said it's an extraordinary number if it is correct, and if assuming it is accurate. But one of the other things I found out recently is that cricketers and fast bowlers in particular have, because of their bowling action, for those who don't know cricket, get online and have a look. It's a fascinating game. And the amount of strength that the bowlers have and the strength of the bone because of the force, and I think I could be wrong on this, 16, 17 times body weight, or 6 or 7 times
it's
body
quite
weight
phenomenal.
going through the front leg.
Yes.
You're a cricketer?
Yes, I am, and I used to bowl as well. So I've had DEXAs done on both my ankles. I can tell you. So one of them is significantly different than the other. Significantly.
Wow, really? There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I've had just focused on the ankle to see, and then track that over time as well to see with the activity I'm doing, am I making sure I'm not losing mass? Because usually when you pass the age of 30, that's our peak. Generally, that we can't, according to the specialists, you don't build any more bone than that. That's your max. I think no, show me. Exactly. So from that, we've got this situation where normally what usually happens to people is that it declines by about 1%. Same thing with so not just bone mass, it's usually muscle mass. And also what people forget about is our balance, our proprioception actually alters by about a percentage point as well. So it actually, which is why a fall can be a huge problem for older people. So the key for me is, because I'm 50, so it's about
you look fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. So it's not just about building, but it's also about just making sure I don't, I'm not on that angle. I want to be at least flatline, but growth is usually key. So I try and grow as much as possible. And I've been growing, so about 1%. So that's been the tracking over the last couple of years. And I've got, supposed to be having another DEXA next month. Whether that's going to be possible with what's going on with COVID at the moment. I'm sure the hospital may have other priorities than having me coming in and lying, under their machine, but we'll see. Yeah.
Well, look, one of the interesting things is because of my scenario being an N=1 only at this point, is the medication that I was on, omeprazole or Somac, which is a proton pump inhibitor. stops the stomach producing acid. And one of the major side effects are iron malabsorption, B12 malabsorption, but also calcium. And I wonder whether the removal of that drug, which I was on daily for 17 years, has allowed my body to start reabsorbing calcium that it may have been leaching because it wasn't getting it from my nutrition, and has my body then stabilized. So that's one really fascinating way of looking at it. And the other thing is, like, is it the diet? Like my diet, similar to yours, I basically eliminated plants out of it nearly 2 years ago. And here comes the scurvy, and have really developed into I'm going to say elite level runner, through the ability to get up pretty much every single day, having recovered really well because I sleep really well, and all of the contributing factors that you need in order to be able to get good at something, right? And for me, running's my therapy. Running's very cathartic, and it's supposed to be a catabolic benefit as well as in a muscle burning. And I've had the opposite effect. I've put on all this muscle for fun, and I really contribute it to the diet.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the number, and I'm sure you've probably seen so many reports of guys and women, but mostly guys, when they go on to a very high protein diet, such as a carnivorous or protein, animal protein based diet, that dramatic changes in body composition, dramatic increases in muscle mass in particular. Some women, but women, the body is a little bit different with it. Does happen, but slightly different hormones. Testosterone is not quite as big.
Well, I think testosterone's another really interesting one. I've certainly noticed that some of the things that testosterone improve, talk about libido, sexual function, aggressiveness, but not violence, assertiveness, I think is probably a better way of doing it, and being more calm under pressure. Have been certain things that I've noticed that have gone up in spades, and I've become more primal, I think, in a lot of ways. And it's a really wonderful side effect of everything. And my partner, Anna, is a female, and she eats largely what I eat for the last 12 months. She's noticed, she's put on some muscle. She was in a very good physical shape. Like, she's got a visible 8-pack. But that has kind of enhanced, really. So it's interesting. It's been really fascinating to see where they take this research as more and more people sort of start getting involved and trying to sort of take control of their health. With what's been going on with this whole COVID thing, hopefully it'll make people look at their health a little bit more and realize that the more robust that we can make ourselves, the less vulnerable to these other things. And like if we get wiped out in 8 years, then we may as well make the most of the next 8 years, Let's
exactly. I want to be in my prime for all of that. Absolutely.
100%.
And we don't have to let things such as our current situation stop us from achieving what we want to. I mean, you can go out for a run pretty safely because it's something you can do by yourself, and you can do it at a time of the day that, there's not going to be too many people around or whatever. These are the choices that you're able to make, and we're fortunate for that. For myself as well, when I do some of my my biohacking work that I do for my bone strength, I can do that in a room that doesn't have to be any bigger than my bathroom necessarily. Like some of the ways I integrate aspects of isometric holds and time under load, and so real long, slow lift type stuff. So some of Dr. Doug McGuff's Body by Science approach, like really slow, everything under tension, and for extreme muscle fatigue. The neuromuscular signaling that occurs there, and the strength that comes with that is quite dramatic for the little amount of perceived effort that you need to put in. So that's what you can do in a small space, because I'm not going to sit here and wait for maybe a door to open up for me to finally get to a gym again later. It's like, well, I don't have to. I can do something here. What can I do? I think it's the thing that we should always ask ourselves. Well, I can't do this, but what can I do? We don't have to be limited.
Couldn't agree anymore if I tried, Diane. It's if people come out the other side of this lockdown fatter and slower than what they were at the start, you've squandered what was a really great opportunity. Far from me to judge. That's just what I would do, and I've really been making the use of it. I really have been enjoying. I've been running more than I would, and off the back of it, have decided to set some really outlandish goals physically.
Awesome,
and
fantastic.
And I'm on track.
Yay.
So I won't reveal what they are just yet.
No.
But that can be for another podcast. But I'm really relishing the whole environment, and it's a blessing to be trapped in a place with those that you love. And if you're with someone that you don't love, then maybe it's time to reassess what's going on.
Well, and look, honestly, we may be fortunate enough to be in environments where we do have security. We have a roof over our head, food in the fridge, and people that care for us. And some people don't have such safety, which I know some friends who have made sure that their offices are still able to be open so that people can go to work if that's one of their few safe moments of the day. So I'm very conscious of my that gift I have, and I'm grateful for that. But one of the other things I'm grateful for, and you touch on there about this is an opportunity, and I was on a video event last week, and I talked about something called the spotlight effect. And for those in psychology that aren't aware, or those that are aware, psychology talks about something called the spotlight effect. And the spotlight effect is when we think people are watching us when we're doing something. Like we think everybody's watching you. Like everyone's looking at Laban with his new shirt on. Everybody's looking at him. Look at him. Look. But in reality, hardly anyone has even noticed you've been in the room. And so, but we have this thing, especially if we're doing something that's a little bit different for us. If we're deciding we're going to walk into the room, and maybe it's normally you'd be going into a meeting, and what if you decided to wear a t-shirt and shorts and something, your t-shirt said "Safe Ferris" or something like that. You'd really look out of place. It might be a bit fun, but you'd feel a bit awkward. But you at that point, you think even more people are watching you than ever, because you're under the extreme spotlight because you're doing something that's socially not normal at that moment. What we have now is a real opportunity. We've got so much time out of the spotlight. So this whole thing with, COVID and being locked down, we're not in front of our colleagues at work. We're not out there in our social groups out in society. We're actually, a lot of it, by ourselves or with our partners or our families or whatever the situation is in our home life. We've got a lot more time to just try something new, because who's going to watch us? Who's going to see us? Only us. We're the only ones that have to know, that didn't work, I'll try it that way next time. So it really gives you a chance to be a bit more fearless and to try something different. I love that about right now. It's like, it's a time to be fearless.
You're right. And a great quote that I heard a little while ago was, it's none of your business what people think of you. It's none of your business what other people think of you. And I love that. And as part of my transition again, I used to seek validation from people a lot in what I used to do, through sort of self-deprecating humor and just demeaning myself. And I don't do that anymore. And now I go the other way, and I'm like, when I go for my runs, for example, I will deliberately run with no shirt on, not to show off, but to acclimatize. And so that by the time winter rolls around and it gets to 1 or 2 degrees, it doesn't get much colder than that in Melbourne here, but it's having a really profound effect on the way that I interpret temperature now. And when it's 13 or 14 degrees, people are rugged up, and I'm like, I don't notice the stuff. Yeah. And the self-conscious person that might worry about what people think could never go out and not wear a shirt when they run. And there's just a very small percentage of the running population, like there might be 1 or 2. It's only men, obviously. It would probably seem a little bit crazy if there was a woman running around topless. But, like, I'm sure if that's legal, like, go for it. But that's just one little thing that I found to be really interesting for my own self-development. And it's made me more confident in other areas of my life. And so my question for you, Diane, would be, someone at home is watching this. They are in a 1-bedroom apartment. Their family's interstate or overseas. They are 100 pounds or 50 kilos overweight. they are really unhappy with their existence right now because they have no goals, they're directionless, they do things that harm them. You know, they either drink too much, or they smoke, or they do drugs, or whatever it might be, or play video games too much. What would be some really great tips or advice that you would give that person to really spark them into gear?
Yeah, it's a challenge, especially if you're living by yourself in those sort of situations, because you know, there are people who may spiral down to a place of great darkness and negativity for themselves. I could really imagine that, having had friends over the years who've been, you know, gone through depression and all sorts of conditions, and so I can imagine the current situation could be quite devastating for many people. It's hard to pull yourself out of that. So I often find when you are trapped in a spiral, and I've had challenges with mental health over the years too, and it's really difficult to pick yourself in that spiral sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's good to learn what starts to be the triggers. And I found for myself, meditation was helpful. Like, I've learned to find myself and understand what those triggers are for things. And so I'm much more comfortable with those. And I can sit with the moments of joy and discomfort at the same time, like know that everything's going to be okay, even if that normally makes me upset, etc. So I would strongly, you know, encourage people to find maybe some apps, because it's often helpful to learn meditation through someone else guiding you through it. And there's so many apps and on YouTube and all sorts of stuff that will take you through those sorts of things. And it can be really calm. It can be so calming as well. It could be those few minutes of calm that you might get in your brain for the day, which is just a gift. And then from there, once again, you know, it's hard to take some of these steps alone sometimes. And so that's why the world of podcasting, there are so many people who can teach you so much and help you take those first steps. And that's where I did over the years. I've gone to podcasts, and then that's given me some ideas, and, oh, I might try that, or, oh, I've never heard of that before. What's the point of that? Why would I do that? And it's made me curious. And then I get online and research stuff. So perhaps there's a community of thought, or Facebook groups, or ways of someone connecting with information, or other people that might be wanting to start something new as well. Because everyone's something new might be different.
Yeah.
You can't assume it'll be, oh, I need to get off the couch and walk around the block. I mean, when I first started learning to run, before, you know, many years before I ran marathons for ultra, whatever, I couldn't run from one end of the block to the other. You know, and it's remarkable to, you know, to look back now. You and I have done so much running over the years, to think, wow, I remember that journey. I had to run from one. I used to run around the block, but I'd do it to start off with. I'd run from one driveway to the next driveway, and then I'd walk to the next driveway, and then I'd run to the next driveway, and then I'd walk to the next driveway. And I did that like for a week. I'd do that a couple of nights a week, and then I'd start to run 2 driveways lengths and walk one, and then, you know, and just gradually, just a tiny bit more. And it's amazing how just that reinforcement that, oh, I can do this, like by doing the same thing a few times first, is really important. You know, trying to scale it up straight away, it can be an invitation for failure for some people.
Yeah.
But reinforcing something, it brings about habituation. You know, that whole, as soon as you can habituate something, as long as habituation is regular practice of something. So, and if you do it often enough, it becomes just habit. And it's like, oh, I know how to do this. And like you said about yourself, you start to become more confident in other things in your life, because you've done something regularly that is a small win for you. It's like, oh, but a big win at the same time. So, and then you can build on it.
Beautiful. And I think it sounds like there's a very similar journey in terms of at least the physical progress. I was in the same boat. I only started running the last couple of years. And, you know, you're an ultra marathon runner. You completed actually one of the same races that I entered in at different years, I think. The TAN 50K, which is 13 laps of the beautiful botanical gardens up Anderson Hill, if anyone knows it. It's quite a monotonous.
Like the body.
I've actually got a funny story about my ultra marathon. If you'd care to indulge me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I met my wonderful partner Anna, who I've been with for 1.5 years, I had started dating this girl whose name I'll leave out. We'd been going together for a week, and we'd been on about 5 dates. We kind of had this instant sort of chemistry and just hit it off really, really quickly. And it was all guns blazing. And I was running the Tan Ultra the Sunday morning. And so we'd been going, maybe a week and a half we'd been going out. And I said, hey, if you like, come down and watch. And she's like, well, look, I'm moving house, but if I can get down there, I'll come and say good day. Yeah, and nice. And I said, well, look, I'm just going to be doing laps of this thing, so you'll find me, right? And so fast forward to the day, and let's call her Sarah, because it's not Sarah. And fast forward to the day, I'm like 41 kilometers in to my 50K run. And I'm starting to fatigue pretty heavily at this point. And the weather, it was a bit overcast and a bit dreary and stuff, but most people were in pretty good moods. And there was this lady, a volunteer, who was handing out lollies, and I was doing my fat adapted run. I was just eating my cheese and all this other stuff. And so I politely declined, and I saw her a couple of times. And as I came around for like what must be about the 11th lap or something, I saw Sarah. And I went, and she was standing next to the girl who was handing out the lollies. And I was running, and I just went up to her, and I put my arms around her, and I kissed her on the lips. And then as I pulled, this woman sort of recoiled in horror, and it wasn't her. and if for anyone that's ever done any ultra running, or distance running, you can hallucinate a little bit. And I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because I realized immediately, this woman looked nothing like Sarah, nothing like her at all. She might have been a similar age, but there was no physical comparison. They were the same skin color. It was about the only similarity. And so I've just sexually assaulted this poor woman on the streets of Melbourne. And I was apologizing profusely, but I still had to
you had to finish your run.
Race. Yeah. And the girl handing out the lollies was cracking up laughing. So I thought, we've got an ally there. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. And sort of waved and kept running. And because what else could I do, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, so I had my earphones, I had my phone with me, and I rang my friend Sam. I was like, oh my God, I just kissed this woman without her permission. I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to come around the other side, and there'll be the divvy van waiting for me. And I really started to freak out. And you combine this with, at this point, probably 4.5 hours of running nonstop. So I'm fatiguing, I'm guilt-ridden, I'm hallucinating, obviously, at times. And Sam's trying to calm me down. And anyway, so I get off the phone, I'm coming around, and I'm coming back to the spot to where I saw this woman. And as I get closer, she comes into view, and then I come within earshot. And she's got a smile on her face. She says, that kiss was an 8 out of 10. I expect the next one to be a 10 out of 10. And I was just like, oh my God, thank you so much for not pressing charges. And Sarah, the girl I was seeing, turned up post-race. She wasn't even there.
Oh, how funny. Oh my gosh.
Genuine mistake. Genuine mistake. What a wonderful, wonderful individual she was not to press charges. And one of those funny things that happens, but yeah.
Case of mistaken identity, yeah. Right.
Have you had anything similar happen?
No, not quite. No, I haven't gone up and kissed random strangers. I think most of us have had experiences where we've, thought somebody was somebody else, hello, blah, blah. Oh my God, I wasn't talking to you. No, it was someone else. I think most of us have had that at some stage or other. I can't think of anything that's even vaguely it's hilarious, that I'm afraid.
I think it must have been some kind of face blindness, sort of temporary face blindness thing that I was going through.
Yeah, there is something about, when you're doing those sorts of distance runs, though, that your mind does go to a different place, though, too, and you can have a fatigue, but it can also take you beyond fatigue. For me, like I've found some of the training, it doesn't mean I haven't had absolutely had fatigue. But one of my training runs beforehand, I was in London, and so I was running a marathon, as you do with your warm up towards the ultra. You end up running a few marathons just as your training runs.
Yeah.
And I was running a marathon in London, and I was just having such a great time. And I was just running along the streets, and here I wasn't lost. I knew where I was, but it was just like, just wanted to keep going. And I think it must be like when, I've heard that when astronauts get to do an EVA, when they get to leave the space station, actually float outside the space station to do stuff, there's a point at which they don't want to come back in.
Wow.
Seriously, there's a point at which they're so overawed by everything. They're overwhelmed by this incredible beauty and the experience of being and seeing what they're. I mean, I cannot fathom the depth of that moment. But there's some moments we have in life.
Just thinking about
it. Sometimes you're just so in flow, and I think when people talk about flow, they know those moments when they've just been writing and just everything is just almost like a moment of perfection that lasts forever, but might only be 15 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And that sort of felt like that day when I was just running on London. I felt like I could run for hundreds of kilometres that day. I didn't. I realised I better go home. I think I ran about 46 or something Ks that day. But anyway, well, I just got away. Time just got away with me, and I thought, I better go home and eat something, I guess. But like you, I wasn't doing it with food, so. But you don't need it. It's overrated.
Food's overrated.
Misunderstood. Oh, food's exactly. Well, food's kind of handy. So, but that whole thing, like that experience of seeing Earth, that's one of the things that I would, if I do get to go to space, the concept of being able to observe our planet from outer space. They call this thing the overview effect. When astronauts look back on Earth and they see this tiny thin line that circumnavigates our planet, and that's our atmosphere, and it's as thin as a rubber band around a basketball. Like it's that sort of the ratios, and they come back just almost evangelists for the environment and to protect what we have, because they see how fragile this is.
Wow.
And so and I've been lucky enough to meet a number of astronauts who've been on the space station, and one man who's actually walked on the moon, the 10th man to walk on the moon, and all of them have talked about this moment, and quite a few of them have come back and had quite a religious change in their life too. It's quite fascinating how it just puts them at a very different place from a spiritual perspective too. So maybe there's something about pulling ourselves out of the detail, pull ourselves out of this, step out of our own spotlight, and maybe we can have a different view of our own selves and maybe feel a stronger love and acceptance of who we are as quite a remarkable, beautiful being. And that's one of the things I would like to try and achieve for myself personally on this planet, but definitely if I get to go to space from that one.
I've got a funny feeling you're going to get your wish, Diane. I don't know, there's just something about you. I kind of feel a bit like Conan O'Brien. I watched a YouTube Conan O'Brien the other day when he interviewed Donald Trump when he was on The Apprentice, and it was only a couple of years later I think he ran for president and then became president. But I kind of get that similar feeling with you. But I'm absolutely fascinated by space travel. I'm fascinated by like the sci-fi movies. Interstellar and a lot of those movies are absolutely my most favorite things, and it's on my bucket list. I'm going to go to space. It'll be available at some point. And,
absolutely.
I don't think I'll fit in your carry-on, but
no, it's about $6,000 per kilogram to send anything to space. So we pack light.
I suppose that given the funding side of things, do they pay you a salary up until when they send you to Mars, and then they're like, we don't have to pay you shit? Like, how does that work? Like,
well, I mean, all of the astronauts for the space agencies get paid a salary even when they're obviously on mission, but they do come back to Earth, of course. I mean, Mars One's concept to go one way and leave us there and good luck to you all, it's a little bit different. However, they also respect the fact that we may all be in different life circumstances at that time when we get to go. If I'm lucky enough to be chosen, yeah, absolutely. During the training program, I would be full-time salary astronaut, blah, blah, blah. And then from the day I get in a rocket and leave, I'd also still be full-time salary as an astronaut, because I may have, maybe I'm supporting my aging parents in a nursing home. Maybe I have a mortgage to still pay. Maybe who knows what my responsibilities may still be to this planet before I go to another one. And it's kind of irresponsible to just, cut those ties completely, although it sounds attractive at times.
Oh, Amex. Yeah, I'm really sorry. You're not going to believe where I am right now. I totally
Can you
forgot.
send me the bill? just send me the bill. My postal address is...
It's really fun to think about, Diane. I get a real thrill just thinking on your behalf. So it must be bloody exciting being in your situation. This Mars One candidate role is not the only thing that you do, as we know. You're involved with some philanthropic stuff, which I'd love to get your ideas, get your thoughts on as well. What are the main areas you're involved in? What do you do?
So from the philanthropy side of stuff, I've been on the board of a number of not-for-profits over the years. Currently, I'm on the board of one specific not-for-profit. It's called the Open Food Network, and they're extraordinary. They're so busy at the moment during COVID. The Open Food Network connects eaters and growers. And when we're in a situation at the moment where our food supply is coming from, really, in Australia, two main providers, supermarket A and supermarket B, where you've got 80% of the market, the duopoly does make it difficult sometimes for the small growers out there to have access to market, and particularly when at the moment it's not always easy to get a farmer's market anymore. We can't gather and go to these sorts of things. So organisations such as the Open Food Network essentially create like buying groups and small co-ops and stuff like that, using open source software programs to allow this to occur. And we're actually global. It's not just we started off in Australia, but we're now in Ireland, I think we're in Canada, France, South Africa now. So we've become a worldwide sort of organisation or not-for-profit enterprise to ensure that there's a fair food available for people, and it's a phenomenal option. And I think that it's just seeing it at the moment with COVID, many more people are getting access to food that our local guys and girls grow. It's smaller scale. It's fantastic. Food miles make a difference, and it's nice to support your local guy. Yeah. So I do that. But it's just a part of my passion towards sustainability and food systems and food waste. And that's my PhD, which I'm finishing this year. I will be Dr. Di, absolutely. Thank you. It's been a long time. Part-time.
Dr. McGrath, reception.
Dr. McGrath. Yes, don't ask me to operate on you. However, I will tell you that you probably left a lot of carbs on that plate. So I've looked at food waste in the hospitality sector.
You've got to have them on there to leave them on there.
It's true. Well, you see what the average, recommended dietary requirements, etc., end up having about 2/3 of the plate being carbohydrates, and roughly similar proportions of fat to protein when it comes to calories.
Yeah.
But in volume, obviously more protein than fat. But what people waste is very different. They waste more carbohydrate than they do the other two. So it's, not unusual. It's a plate filler and much less nutrient dense. I think from an evolutionary perspective, our body knows what it's going to not just enjoy, but get better nutritional value from. And after a while, don't you get sick of spinach?
Popeye certainly did.
I know. Yes, it's veggie. I mean, in the household, we waste more fresh fruit and veg than anything else. But when we go out to dine, it's more processed carbohydrates. So the bread basket, the pasta, rice, the side dish of rice that you get with the Chinese or it's Thai food or whatever. They're the most common things that are left on plates. Chips, French fries. The potatoes, gosh, only half of all potatoes grown for human consumption are ever eaten. Half.
Wow.
So if you imagine how much land we clear to plant things that are never eaten. Half. How many ecosystems have we destroyed because we really didn't need to supersize those fries? I could have had a small slice. You know, it's phenomenal. And people who talk about the environmental impact of different sorts of diets don't think about the waste aspect of stuff. There's very little waste in protein or fat-based diets when it comes to food waste. There's an exceptional amount of waste from plant-based diets, both from the production of them, because of how much land is cleared and fertilizer is needed and things like that. And then, of course, you know, how much mass of it there is that ends up going to waste. So it's not a simple story of cows fart. There's a bit more to it than that.
Oh, well, yeah, look, this is something that's really close to my home as well, Diana. And part of my whole journey is that when I studied, you know, and I've spent close to 30 hours a week for really the last probably 4 or 5 years reading self-development, nutritional, but also like the bioavailability side of things, the environmental, that type of thing as well. Trying to immerse myself in non-mainstream information in conjunction with all the other stuff. And I can attest the waste that I used to have, and this is someone who trained as a chef. I spent 1.5 years working in New Zealand as an apprentice chef, and the amount of when we used to do conferences for up to 950 people in Christchurch, which was the venue there, and the amount of food that would be thrown out at the end of the day was heartbreaking. And having, particularly the last 2 years, eliminated close to probably 99% of what I eat is just animal protein. I don't throw out anything. It's because the steak that you buy or the mince that you buy is it's expensive in comparison to, you know, spring onions or whatever. And you can cook it and then reuse it. And I made a bone broth the other day, and I put some T-bones from an eaten T-bone steak that I froze probably 4 months ago in the freezer. And made a beautiful bone broth out of it. And some chuck steak that was frozen there for a couple of months. And normally that kind of thing would be thrown out, but like, so that's something that I'm really interested in. I'm really glad that you brought it up as well. I think the sustainability of like throwing away half of all potatoes, like what land does that equate to? How much of a carbon footprint does that attribute to? Like, what could farmers be doing with their time better if they weren't growing potatoes? Like, there's
how much money would they save as well? How much fertilizer would they not need to purchase? What about the water that they don't need to get onto the water market in Australia? I mean, Australia, you know, water is such a scarce resource. You know, farmers trade. It costs them money to access water. It's not just, I can tap into the river. So there's, and the topsoil that's lost as well. Like every time you plow, it depletes the quality of the soil. It's going to be damaged. So, you know, planting each year new potatoes, it's atrocious.
So what can we do? What can we do? Someone's watching this going, oh my God. Well, firstly, the Earth's ending in 8 years. Diane's off to Mars anyway, so she doesn't care.
So don't care.
But like, what? See ya. Wouldn't want to be here.
No. No.
What do we do? What's the simple fix? If you were God and president, it's pretty cool, by the way. All hail.
Oh, Almighty.
Lord Diane. In a really quick synopsis, what can we do?
Look, it can be really simple. Most people have no clue that they're wasting things. They don't realize that it's occurring. Like in our little worlds that we all have that are quite different and unique, what you might consider as food even might be different to me. You know, for example, avocados. Many people don't realize that 70% of the antioxidants in avocado are in the seed. So most people throw out the seed because we don't eat the seed, right? It's not edible. That's not true. In Mexican traditional dishes, the seed is dried and ground up and used in their ground meat dishes as well, because it's just part of their food system.
Did not know that. Did not know that.
Oh, I'm full of useless bits of information like that. No, actually, it started. I used to play a game with myself when I first started in the food waste area, years ago now. When I'd started to essentially watch my waste, and that's why I call my PhD Watch My Waste, because that's where it starts. If we can start paying attention to something, we can actually identify what our problem is and can do something about it. So I started to look, when I'd make my dinner, I'd look at all the things that might have been piling up, like the trimmings or whatever, like what would I put in my little kitchen caddy that would be then going to the bin? It's like, oh, and then I started playing a game called, Can I Eat That? And I started thinking, hey, is that really,
Sounds like my kind of
is that
game.
edible? Is that edible? Why am I throwing that away? Is that actually edible? Is there any nutrient in that? So then I'd start to go, oh, avocados. I love avocados. Is the seed edible? Yes, it is. Fantastic. How do I play with it? Then is the skin edible? Yes, it is. Oh, great. I'll do this with this. So I started just doing that, and it turned out that I pared my food waste down to, really just coffee grinds, because I didn't have a garden to put them into. But even eggshells, I realized, I can turn that into calcium supplement. Oh, fantastic. So all of this is...
you eat the eggshells. Well done.
Yeah, well, at the moment I'm not having eggs at all. But when I was eating eggs, one eggshell gives you equivalent of roughly what your RDIs would be of calcium per day. So, but not everyone needs an entire eggshell. Like, you don't need a calcium supplement for a day's worth. So I'd grind up a heap of them. There's a process, but I basically keep a small jar of ground up, finely powdered eggshell in the fridge, and then just add it to my meal. If I knew that my day's calcium intake would be pretty low, I just add some into my food. So just bump it up, and then no waste. Simple. So,
wow.
so essentially, I think part of that is just to first pay attention, to have a look at what we are doing. It's like, I'm throwing out like a third of my bread, because most people throw out about 30% of our baked goods get thrown away. So it's like, I'm throwing out like a half a loaf of bread or a third of a loaf. Maybe I'll buy a smaller loaf. Maybe I'll freeze it when it gets to about halfway through the loaf. So little things like that. You can start to play a little game with yourself, gamify it. It's like, I wonder if I can reduce how many loaves I throw out if I do this instead. Or, just little things like that. But it first requires you paying attention to it. And so that's the first key, because what that will do, it will end up buying less. We won't buy as much of what we think we need.
Yeah.
We're just buying what we want or what we're used to purchasing. And at the moment with COVID, we're stocking up on stuff because we're worried about scarcity. In this country, we grow enough food to feed 60 million people. We're not going to have food scarcity. We're going to be just fine, people. Yeah. Just fine. So we can actually just buy what we need. And, it just gives you more power then too. You're making decisions based on what you really know. It's a confidence thing. You can be really confident then in cooking. And there's some great stuff that some of the chefs are doing online at the moment about helping people learn how to cook more with some of the ingredients they have at home. Because you can't go out and buy this, that, or the other, or go out to dinner. And I follow the stuff, say, of Alice Zaslavsky, for example. And she does heaps of great, you can do this at home with this that you left over last night, sort of stuff. And it's fun. It can be really creative. So it doesn't have to be something daunting like, I'm a bad person. We haven't always learned some of these skills. Like, I never knew I could eat an avocado seed until I discovered I could.
I didn't know you could either. Yeah, I can.
There you go. If you ever do eat plants again.
What does it taste like?
It tends to absorb a lot of the flavour of what it's cooked with. So it doesn't have a strong, sort of slightly nutty flavour, like very subtle.
Yeah.
But then it just, takes in the flavour of whatever else it's cooked in. Same thing with the skin. You don't eat the skin raw. You tend to, I bake things in it. So like I might have put in, I'd pull out some of the avocado flesh, and I'd put in some egg and some cheese or something like that, and then put it in the oven and bake it. And so the skin softens and just becomes like a jacket for whatever of it's cooked in. And then you eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it just absorbs the flavour of what you're eating. It loses that tartness that the skin would otherwise have, and it's not tough at all. It's quite soft. Yeah,
right. Okay, it's interesting. Is there any issues with any dangerous anti-nutrients in there at all?
Well, they're plants, so hey, I think there's good luck finding a plant that hasn't got some sort of anti-nutrient in it. I mean, we know just plants have a defense system, as opposed to an animal of any type, or an insect or fish or whatever. They can't run away from, what might be wishing to eat them.
Yeah.
So how do they prevent being eaten? They have their own defense systems. And so a lot of those things are essentially like insecticides to try and prevent insects eating them. And so we're consuming, when we eat plants, especially if we eat them raw, if we don't do something to alter what the actual structure is,
Yeah.
we're essentially eating mini insecticides.
Yeah, and the other issue is that they don't really have they can't chelate a lot of the external toxins with, the sprays and the whatever it might be that an animal can filter through its filtration system, really. There's lots of things, and maybe another podcast, certainly, to focus, because it's a really fascinating topic, and when you start wrapping your head around this stuff, like you and I have sort of been doing you've been doing it for a lot longer than me, but when you start understanding how we interact with our environment and how we can improve it by going maybe against the status quo in some cases, and how that can help the environment, and then prolong our time here on Earth and make it a really enjoyable process. We don't need to live lives of anxiety and paranoia and stress and fear. And this is something that I can certainly attest to. My outlook on life has shifted dramatically, despite going through tremendous adversity, especially over the last couple of years. But the way that I'm able to now handle that is exemplary, because I think that my body is now in a homeostatic way of what we have evolved to become. I don't know if homeostatic's the right word for it, but I think it is.
Yeah, you feel like you're in balance.
Exactly. And when you can handle pressure and stress because your body's functioning well, your whole life will shift. And if you are that person at home being overwhelmed by what's going on in the world, there is a place you can start, and it's with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay to not be okay too at the moment. I know so many people that have contacted me to say there are some days they've just cried for what seems like no reason. And these are people who have really got it together and so forth. That doesn't mean that life can't be challenging some moments. But I guess that's the point. Those are all just a moment. And so this moment is the only one we've got. Like the whole thing about the power of now, Eckhart Tolle, it's only now that we have. And yes, the planet might no longer be something we as a species are on in 7 years' time or whatever. But like, regardless, I could also get hit by a bus crossing the road tomorrow, but I'm here now. So this is the bit that matters, this bit right now. And so even though I might want to go to Mars in 10 years' time, the way I've been approaching that is to integrate that into my life, so that the choices I make today and the behaviors I have today are ones that benefit me today, but for the best opportunity in the future as well.
Beautifully said, Diana. And I'm very conscious of and respecting your time. And I think here is probably a really great place to wrap this up with a final comment, if you're happy to make one, on anything that we've discussed today. You're not obliged to at all, but
no, that's fine. Look, actually, I'd like to make a comment about the name of your YouTube channel as well, about becoming your own superhuman or superhero. Sorry, superhero.
Superhero, yeah, same
thing. People sometimes, and myself as well, there's this thing about expectation. Nobody expects anything of you except you. And I know I've been guilty of this in the past. My expectations of myself and worrying about what other people might be expecting of me, 99% of the time, you're already exceeding everyone else's expectation.
Yeah.
So becoming your own superhero does not mean you have to try and be something that everyone else is going to think is sensational. They probably do already.
Amazing. I couldn't have said it better myself. You've left me pretty speechless there, Diane. And I just wanted to say that today was something that I've been looking forward to ever since we booked this in. I'm so grateful that you were able to take the time to do this. And I really look forward to the response from the greater public. And I'm sure, like a lot of people, we're all very keen to see your progress and maybe in 10, 11 years time, if the world hasn't spun off its axis, that we can wave our handkerchiefs from Cape Canaveral or Fort
Bon
Lauderdale,
voyage.
wherever it is they send you off, and what a fascinating individual you are. And it's been a pleasure to know you for this long, and I look forward to sort of getting to know more of Dianne McGrath, Dr. Dianne McGrath, when you get your
Thanks, Laban. It's been fantastic being your guest on your inaugural show.
Yes, thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Will do.
And we'll leave it there. Arrivederci.
See ya.
Bye.